The slap arrived faster than a thought. My glasses left my face, skidding into the chandelier light and shattering on the ballroom floor while 130 guests held their breath like it might keep the moment from happening. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest had more practice. "Hand over the keys, Celeste," Brianna said, wedding silk rippling like a flag. "A woman your age doesn't need that much space." The orchestra stuttered into silence. Phones froze midair. My son, Ryan, stared at the parquet as if the wood could explain me. No one moved to help while I crouched in that golden room, palms trembling, feeling for the frames I buy two at a time because I have learned to plan for breaks. It should have been the happiest night of his life. I made the first doll cake he ever loved. I ironed his graduation shirt until it was brave. I taught him to say please to women who had earned it. But here he was, carved out by fear and other people's opinions, watching me like a stranger who'd taken the wrong seat. Brianna smoothed her dress. "Your apartment would be perfect for us while we look for something better," she announced, loud enough for the uplights to hear. The room nodded the way a room nods when it wants the night to go back to pretty. I stood carefully, glass crackling under my shoes, and something inside me stood up with me, a part of myself I had treated like company that might not stay. Tears came the way rain comes to a roof that's learned how to hold it. I didn't apologize. I did not offer them the comfort of my soft voice. I let the silence be the size it needed to be. This wasn't sudden. Cruelty rarely is. It had come in teaspoons. "That car is too old for you, Miss Walker. You should move somewhere safer. Seniors shouldn't be alone. We can help you downsize." Smile. Pat. Dismiss. I had carried their comments the way I carry groceries, 2 bags at a time, chin tucked down, house keys ready. "Mom," Ryan said finally, the word thin in his mouth. He glanced at Brianna, then at me, then away. The boy who once defended turtles at recess did not defend me. I looked at him as if he were 5 and about to touch the stove. "Baby," I said, "you see what you see." The manager hovered at the edge of the crowd, eyes like a ledger. Mr. Reynolds, always polite, always counting. The photographer lowered his camera. Somewhere a child asked for cake and a mother shushed him with a slice. I stepped out of my shoes, the heels that tried to keep up with people who never walked at my pace, and slipped on flats I'd stashed in my bag. Practicality is not a lack of elegance. It's the elegance of survival. I picked up the pieces of my glasses, wrapped them in my napkin, and set them on a table where the flowers still pretended. "This was only a party, Celeste," Brianna said, sweeter now that the room was watching. "We're just trying to start our life. Don't you want your son to be happy?" Happiness built on theft is a tent in a windstorm. It looks like shelter until weather remembers your name. I turned to the nearest mirrored column and found myself there, 69. Black, silver at the temples, a posture that remembered who raised me. I had behaved like a lady all my life because my mother told me gentleness is power when you keep the handle. Tonight I remembered the handle. "Enjoy your blessings," I told them, voice steady. "You'll need them." Someone exhaled. Someone whispered. "Poor thing." A cousin I barely know recorded with her phone held low. "Mercy help us. How we love a spectacle as long as it isn't ours." I walked toward the exit. Not fast, not shaky, careful, like a woman carrying hot coffee through a crowd. The band tried to find a song that could make sense of this and failed. The door attendant opened a path like a curtain. At the threshold I paused. The air outside had the honest chill of February. It didn't care who wore lace or who wore shame. I could still hear the ballroom. Muffled and expensive. A world that wanted me quiet and useful. Out here the night had room for decisions. For years I have lived the way my late husband and I agreed. Modest car, simple dresses, a life that doesn't make a scene. Not because that was all I had, but because we learned early that visible wealth drags thieves and cowards to your doorstep. I kept that lesson like a recipe card, tucked behind the flower. I kept other things too. I pressed my palm to my cheek, felt the sting, and let it teach me. Half the room believed I was fragile. The other half wanted me to be. Both halves were wrong. My phone warmed my hand. The screen lit my fingers the way candles light a sanctuary, enough to see what matters, not enough to flatter what doesn't. Mr. Carter's name sat there in my favorites, a number I hadn't needed in months. I could call now, but I did not yet. A good move deserves its own breath. Behind me, laughter restarted, brittle as spun sugar. Somewhere a toast clinked. Somewhere a lie rehearsed itself for the morning. I stepped into the parking lot and the cold put its hands on my shoulders like an old friend. The sky was black and honest. The asphalt kept everyone's secrets without choosing sides. I lifted my chin the way my mother did when she had a point to make and no time to waste. You can be quiet and still be loud. You can be kind and still be clear. You can be a lady and still refuse to be handled. I tucked the broken glasses deeper into my bag, smoothed my dress, and looked at the time. 30 minutes from now, the music would stop for a different reason. Outside, the air had no patience for lace. I crossed the portico, found my old sedan, and sat where the steering wheel still remembered my hands. The ballroom glow spilled onto the lot like a lie that hadn't learned the weather. I called Mr. Carter. "Mrs. Walker? I need the blue portfolio," I said. "The one with the contracts, bank directives, and venue guarantee. Bring the notarized letters we prepared, all copies. And Harold tonight." A quiet beat. "Are you certain?" "I'm past certain. 30 minutes." When he hung up, the car gave me the small mercy of silence. I set the timer on my phone not for drama, for discipline, and watched 30. Oh, blink into work. The second hand pulled me back through months of teaspoons. Brianna in my kitchen eyeing the view from my balcony like a realtor, counting my windows before counting my blessings. "You shouldn't be alone in a place this size," she'd said, fingering my thrift store vase like it might confess a crime. Ryan, echoing her lines as if they were his. "Mom, it's safer if you downsize." Safer for whom was the part we never said out loud. My late husband and I had decided long ago to live invisibly. We taught our son that money behaves better when it doesn't need attention. We invested in dull things that last. Bonds, brick, quiet buildings with good roofs. I worked church bake sales and a few shifts a week at the community cafe because being needed keeps you young. The car stayed paid off. The dresses stayed simple. The account stayed private. It wasn't stinginess. It was strategy. The phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, someone from inside. "Are you okay?" I typed back. "I am standing." I turned the phone face down. The screen isn't a friend. It's a crowd. At 26 to 14, I opened my purse and took inventory like a nurse. Spare flats already on. Tissues unused now. They'd done enough for other people. Lipstick no. I wanted my real mouth. I pulled out my broken glasses, wrapped in napkin, and placed them in the glove compartment. Evidence doesn't always live on paper. At 21:03, I remembered Ryan at 8, solemn as a judge, telling a neighbor boy, "You don't take what isn't yours." Tonight he hadn't defended me. That truth stung more than the slap. Love can survive truth. It cannot survive pretense. At 18:45, I wrote 3 sentences on an index card, in case my voice forgot. How to be steady. No yelling. Only facts. I love my son. I do not fund his disrespect. I slid the card into the pocket above my heart. At 15:02, the door to the ballroom opened and laughter spilled like dropped beads, skittering across asphalt, trying to look expensive. A group hurried past me, cheeks bright, unaware they were walking through the hinge of a story. At 12:19, I called the landlord's emergency line for Ryan's apartment and left a clean message as required. "This is Celeste Walker, guarantor on Unit 508 for Ryan Walker. You will receive formal notice of guarantee withdrawal by morning. Please direct all questions to my advisor." I kept my voice even and my verbs correct. Kindness, even now. Professional, even now. At 10:40, I texted myself a list titled Threads to Cut. Auto, transfers, credit cards, insurance, event guarantee, pet deposit I'd quietly covered, gas card, temporary loans that became permanent. When you write it down, you see how heavy a net is on the one holding it. At 8:03, a memory arrived uninvited. Brianna 2 weeks ago, bringing pamphlets for active senior living. Her smile just wide enough to hide the arithmetic. All-inclusive meals and activities. Celeste. No maintenance. Maintenance was never my problem. Entitlement was. Headlights swung across the lot. A black sedan parked beside me, neat as a period at the end of a firm sentence. Mr. Carter stepped out with his winter coat and his caution. He opened the back door and removed the blue portfolio I'd asked for and a thinner envelope I hadn't. "What's the extra?" I asked, stepping into the light. "Witness statements templates," he said, "if you choose to collect them later. Also, a letter to the venue manager regarding the guarantee, Mr. Reynolds, yes?" "Yes." I took the portfolio. It was heavier than its size. "So am I." He peered at my cheek with a gentleness that made me grateful and impatient at once. "Do you need a clinic?" "I need a microphone and a table," I said. "The clinic can wait." We reviewed the pieces like a pilot checks gauges. Bank directives to suspend outgoing transfers effective immediately. Notice to revoke the event guarantee. Copies of 3 years of wire receipts that would answer the only question Brianna ever actually asked: how far does the money go? A prepared statement I had never wanted to read. "I will no longer subsidize choices that injure me. Remember," he said, "they may try to escalate. If someone questions capacity, they won't get far," I said. "I have test results in that folder and neighbors who know my name, not just my square footage." "Then we'll proceed when you say." We walked toward the entrance together, neither fast nor slow. The doorman straightened, caught sight of Mr. Carter, and looked, suddenly like a person in a room where things change. Through the glass I could see the chandelier casting forgiveness on anyone who stood under it. Forgiveness isn't the chandelier's job. At the threshold I paused and touched Mr. Carter's sleeve. "One more thing," I said. "After tonight, draft an appointment with Miss Hale Estate Adjustments. But we don't discuss the will in there." "Not yet. This is about boundaries, not theater." "Understood." He tucked his pen into his notebook. "You'll speak first?" "I'll speak last," I said. "First, we let the paper talk." I squared my shoulders, felt the card above my heart, and nodded to the doorman. The music inside tried to be brave. The floor inside tried to be steady. I was both. The foyer was a pause between two worlds. Chandelier hush on one side, honest February night on the other. I stood in that small hallway where carpet swallows footsteps and remembered how a life gets built when you aren't trying to impress strangers. Harold Carter opened the blue portfolio like an altar. Tabs weighted: bank, lease, event, health, witnesses, each label printed neat as a prayer you intend to keep. "Before we go in," he said, "you sign here." He tapped the bank directives. Not dramatic documents, just verbs with consequences. Suspend, revoke, terminate. I read each line the way a baker reads a recipe, knowing a teaspoon careless today becomes a ruin tomorrow. People think modesty is poverty with better manners. My late husband knew different. "Quiet money sleeps," he used to say, laughing in our kitchen with his sleeves rolled in a ledger nobody would ever see. We didn't buy applause. We bought roofs. We picked investments that yawned. We kept birthdays big and purchases small. It wasn't performance. It was peace. And when Ryan was little, we taught him that the loudest thing wealth should do is keep the lights on and the fridge faithful. Then 3 years ago, after Robert died, little temporary requests began to appear at my door like stray cats that already knew the house rules. A card between billing cycles, an insurance lapse by accident, a rent shortfall because the boss was late with bonuses. I told myself I was helping my boy over a rough patch. Mothers shorten winters when they can. The transfers started tidy and became a habit with its own key. $4,500 a month, disguised as luck. The gas card. The pet deposit I guaranteed because the landlord didn't allow dogs unless a wedding venue deposit placed under my name so they could focus on love. I was the invisible scaffolding around a building painted to look self-supporting. "Mrs. Walker," Harold said gently when my pen paused, "you're not punishing, you're correcting." "I know," I said, and I signed. My name looked like my mother's in that moment, firm, unsorry. He slid the pages into a courier envelope and texted the bank liaison. The confirmation dinged with a small, cheerful sound that did not understand the size of what it had done. Somewhere a machine would stop sending money to a problem that only grew when fed. Somewhere a ledger would finally remember to tell the truth. We reviewed the venue letter. Next, a single page addressed to Mr. Reynolds, event manager, revoking my guarantee as allowed by Clause 13, subsection B, extraordinary circumstances. I thought of the slap, the silence, The way Ryan studied the floorboards instead of his mother. If that wasn't extraordinary, nothing was. Health documents, Harold said, passing me a slim folder. Recent evaluation. Clean. Just in case anyone decides your clarity is inconvenient. Clarity is always inconvenient to someone, I said. I slid the folder back. But it's contagious. He smiled with the faint approval of a man who has seen ugly endings and prefers this kind. Witness forms are optional, he added. If neighbors saw certain visits, certain tones, certain rehearsed phrases, we can collect statements later. I won't turn my life into spectacle, I said. But I won't pretend a script wasn't being practiced in my kitchen. The door to the ballroom opened a few inches and a curl of music escaped, confused about its job. Voices floated, sugared, brittle, and then the door closed again. I could picture the cake. Tears in rehearsal for an anniversary they hadn't earned. I felt my cheek pulse where Brianna's hand had tried to write a story on my face. She had written the wrong woman. 3 years, I said to Harold, not needing to be brave about it anymore. I paid like a shadow so they could play in the light. It taught them the wrong lesson. What lesson do you want to teach now? He asked. That love is not a debit card, I said. That dignity is not collateral. That I can want my son happy and still refuse to fund his disrespect. He nodded, and for a moment we stood with the quiet the way you stand with an old friend unafraid to let it do the talking. I thought of the index card in my pocket. No yelling, only facts. I love my son. I do not fund his disrespect. A woman should have her vows handy. Last item, he said, producing an envelope I'd asked him to keep sealed until I was sure. Appointment with Hill Law Estate Review. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. Some decisions are made the way tides are made. Not by impulse, but by pull. Not tonight, I said, and he tucked it away. Tonight is boundaries, not inheritance. Boundaries it is. Through the glass, I could see Mr. Reynolds conferring with a server, both of them watching a problem bloom at the center of a room designed for photographs. I slipped my flats off and on again, the way athletes touch the line before they run. I checked the time. 6 minutes since I signed. The transfers were already asleep. The net I'd been holding had finally let go of my hands. They tingled the way fingers do when blood returns. Harold handed me the portfolio. It weighed as much as a small baby, or a truth you have decided to carry to term. Paper first, he reminded me softly. Paper first, I agreed. Then words, if words are still necessary. I closed my eyes and saw Ryan as he had been at 5 green crayon on his cheek. Solemn promise to never take what isn't his. I opened them and saw him at 35, learning that promises unpracticed go soft. Let them decide who they want to be, I told myself out loud. My job is to decide who I am. We squared ourselves. The doorman recognized Harold now and straightened into a man ready for protocol. I placed my palm on the blue cover and felt its cool certainty. The hens that had been paying from the shadows were done hiding. I pushed a door, and the ballroom's gold light reached for us like a habit about to be broken. The ballroom swallowed us whole, gold light, flowers holding their breath, a song pretending not to be nervous. I kept my flats, my spine, and my rule card tucked above my heart. Paper first. Mr. Reynolds spotted Harold Carter beside me and straightened as if someone had just whispered inspection. I greeted him with a nod I reserve for people who do their jobs. Harold handed over the single page letter on venue letterhead, the one that knew its clause numbers better than it knew mercy. Mr. Reynolds, Harold said, low and courteous, per clause 13b. Extraordinary circumstances. Mrs. Walker revokes her personal guarantee for tonight's charges effective immediately. I have copies for your records and your counsel. We'll pause here and give you time to read. The manager's eyes moved quickly, lips shaping the clauses like prayers. He looked up once, toward the head table where Ryan sat pale and Brianna arranged her mouth into the shape of innocence, then finished the page. He didn't argue with grammar. Understood, he said. Professionalism beating gossip by a nose. I'll need confirmation of identity. Of course, Harold said, producing the notarized ID copy and the original for his inspection. He offered a second letter. This one informs a couple of the change, with my contact details for questions. Mr. Reynolds nodded, throat working. Would you like a microphone? I shook my head. Just the room's attention for 1 minute. He lifted a hand. The band quieted. Conversations thinned to the clink of a nervous fork. 130 faces turned toward a woman they had earlier chosen not to see. I did not shout. I did not perform. I placed a blue portfolio on a nearby cocktail table and opened it so the tabs faced the room like labeled shelves. My name is Celeste Walker, I said, voice steady enough to pour. I'm here to state 3 facts that concern this event and my family. Then I'll sit down and let professionals do their work. First, I continued, touching the event tab, my personal guarantee for tonight's expenses is revoked under the contract's extraordinary circumstances clause. Any balance is now the responsibility of the newlyweds. A ripple, quick as a breeze over water. Someone's phone tilted upward. I kept my eyes on Mr. Reynolds until he gave me the small nod that means a sentence has landed where it belongs. Second, I touched bank, effective tonight. All private transfers I have been making to cover personal bills for Ryan Walker and Brianna, credit cards, insurance, cash advances are suspended. If you were relying on invisible support, it is no longer available. If you were unaware of it, now you know, a cousin near the bar whispered. I knew it, and then remembered the room had ears. Third, I touched lease. My guarantee on my son's apartment ends per notice already filed with the landlord. He has 30 days to provide a replacement guarantor or vacate. That's the policy. That's the paper. I closed the portfolio. I did not explain. People who trade in entitlement treat explanations like receipts to be returned. I keep mine. Brianna broke first. You can't do this, she said, smile gone brittle. You can't humiliate us at our own wedding. I looked at her the way you look at a smoke alarm when it tells the truth at an inconvenient time. Humiliation requires innocence, I said. I'm making announcements. Ryan stood, then sat, then stood again, muscles remembering manners his mouth had forgotten. Mom, he started, voice reaching for the version of me that bakes doll cakes and fixes collars. Please, let's talk outside. We will, I said. When talking is what's happening. Tonight, I'm telling. You'll have room for your part. Harold stepped forward with duplicate sets of each notice, placing one neatly in front of Ryan, one in front of Brianna. He didn't linger. He didn't look for a camera. He lived in verbs. Deliver, confirm, record. A guest, toward the back older, sensible, said to no one. She's calm. Calm is what dignity sounds like when it remembers its own address. Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat and found his manager voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll continue service while we coordinate payment with the hosts. Staff, please hold bar orders briefly. He glanced at me with a kind of respect I hadn't asked for but had brought with me anyway. Brianna reached for Ryan's arm. Say something, she hissed, not as quiet as she hoped. Make her stop. I could have told them 100 small histories. The pet deposit I consigned so a rescue dog could have a couch. The gas card I filled when jobs were between. The loans that changed shape and forgot their end dates. I said none of it. I had chosen the ledger over the match. Ledgers don't gloat. I love my son, I said, for the room and for the boy who once defended turtles at recess. I will not finance my own disrespect. Those 2 truths will live in the same house. Silence held. Not the heavy kind. The kind that makes room. From the bandstand, the sax player shifted his weight like he'd been waiting all night for an honest note. Near the doors, the doorman relaxed into the posture of a man who has seen worse and prefers better. Phones hovered, undecided between spectacle and witness. Harold touched my elbow. We had done what we came to do. Paper had spoken in full sentences and remained unruffled. I turned slightly to go, then faced Mr. Reynolds once more. Thank you for your professionalism, I told him. If any vendor needs my statement in writing, Mr. Carter will provide it. I won't be debating terms in the aisle. He inclined his head, grateful to be handed a lane. We'll proceed accordingly. Ryan tried again, softer. Mom, please. I'm at the table by the foyer, I said, letting him see the mercy and the border at once. When you're ready for facts, come sit. I walked off the center of the room the same way I had walked out of it earlier. Not fast, not dramatic. Exact. Behind me, the gold light stayed gold. In front of me, The four's shadow felt like shade, not exile. The blue portfolio was lighter in my hands now that it had done its job. The truth had taken its seat. The bill would too. I took the small table by the four, the one under the sconce that makes everyone look honest. The blue portfolio rested beside a glass of water. I set my index card on my knee like a compass. No yelling, only facts. I love my son. I do not fund his disrespect. Mr. Reynolds approached the head table the way rain approaches parades, courteous, inevitable. He kept his voice low, but the room heard. Anyway, an alternate form of payment is required to continue service. The band stopped pretending to be brave. Servers froze mid-aisle, trays steady, eyes soft the way professionals make them. Brianna stood with a smile that had lost its scaffolding. "Run my card," she said, producing a glittering rectangle that wanted to be a wand. The bartender tried once, twice. The small machine answered, in a tone that isn't unkind, just final. Another card. A third. Declines make the same sound whether you're rich in outfits or rent. A murmur moved across the tables like wind in a wheat field. Someone near the cake whispered, "Is this part of the program?" It was, just not theirs. Ryan's face went the color of an empty envelope. He leaned toward Mr. Reynolds and spoke too fast. "We can fix this. Tomorrow, my boss, there was a deposit. This is a misunderstanding." Mr. Reynolds listened with a patience learned from 1,000 rehearsals that ended in the parking lot. "I believe you," he said, meaning he understood. "I also have policy," meaning he would keep his job. I didn't gloat. I rested my hands flat on the table to keep from reaching for my son like he was and worried about field day. Quiet is a kindness when people are learning gravity. Phones rose, some brazen, some shy, small red dots blinking like guilty stars. A cousin panned across the room and caught me in the corner of her frame. I looked back at her, not daring her, just being unmovable. Later, those videos would do a job I couldn't. Tonight, they only told the time. Brianna's voice climbed a ladder only she could. "See, you did this," she hissed toward the foyer, then louder for the crowd. "She's ruining our wedding. A woman her age doesn't need a 3-bedroom in the city." Gasps arrived on cue. "You can make an audience. You cannot make them like the show." Harold slid between us like a velvet rope. "Miss Brianna," he said evenly, "please direct payment questions to the manager. Mrs. Walker won't be discussing finances on the floor." He turned to Mr. Reynolds. "Shall we step aside to coordinate vendors?" Bless him for giving chaos a clipboard. Mr. Reynolds nodded and peeled off to the bar, instructing staff to keep water and coffee flowing while he sorted the account. The word account did a lot of work in that room. A bridesmaid crying pretty approached my table with a trembling napkin. "Mrs. Walker, can I get you ice?" I touched my cheek and found only warmth returning to itself. "I'm fine, baby," I said, and meant it. Ryan came then, stopping 2 feet short like my gravity had changed. He looked at the portfolio as if it might bite. "Mom, can we undo this?" "We can only stop doing what should never have started," I said. "Sit if you want facts." He sat. His hands were men's now, but the way he folded them was exactly the boy who tried to hide a broken seashell in church. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, voice hushed, as if honesty were a delicate animal. "That you were helping." "That you," he swallowed. "That it was you. Because help isn't help when it's theater," I said. "And because I thought a season would end." Seasons don't end when you keep paying for winter. He looked at the room where his brand new wife was rehearsing indignation and found the edges of a lesson you only learn by falling. "She said you don't need space," he murmured. "She said the quiet part out loud," I answered. "Space isn't square footage. It's dignity that can breathe." At the head table, Mr. Reynolds spoke with a trio of vendors, faces turned sympathetic but firm. A DJ nodded, unplugged a strand of lights, and waited. The florist adjusted an arrangement no one would remember. Policy, not punishment. Reality, not revenge. A woman from my church slid in on my other side and tucked her hand over mine. She didn't ask questions. She didn't offer advice. She gave me presence, the only currency that spends in a storm. Brianna marched toward us, veil trembling like a white flag that refused to learn its job. "You've embarrassed Ryan," she said, jabbing a manicured finger at the space between us. "You have no idea what love is." I met her eyes and let my years do their own introduction. "Child," I said softly, Love keeps a record when lies try to erase it. Love will not fund your disrespect. Love is not afraid of lights. She flinched at child more than at the truth. Entitlement hates genealogy. Mr. Reynolds arrived with the kindness of a final answer. We can continue once a valid form of payment is presented. Otherwise, we'll begin closing service in 10 minutes. He looked at me, then at Harold, and inclined his head the slightest bow to boundaries held without spectacle. Ryan stared at the polished floor he liked so much an hour ago. "I'm sorry," he said to the wood. It was not for me yet, but it was the first sentence that belonged to him. I stood. The room noticed without meaning to. "Thank you for listening," I said to no one and everyone. "The professionals will coordinate the rest." I gathered the blue portfolio. It felt lighter. Silence had cost me years. Tonight, it bought me back. By the time the last centerpiece wilted under the house lights, the story had already started walking without me. Poor Ryan. Unstable mother. Ruin her own son's wedding. Gossip travels light. Truth packs documents. I slept, not long but clean, and woke to a phone fed on other people's certainty. 3 voicemails from numbers I didn't save, 2 from relatives who used prayer as punctuation, and 1 from Brianna Syrup over razor wire asking if I was ready to apologize and do the right thing. I brewed coffee, set my rule card beside the mug, and wrote a heading across a fresh page. Aftermath facts only. Harold arrived at 9 with his winter coat and his calm. "We expect a noise," he said, laying down the morning printouts. Their side had posted a photo of cake and captions about elder confusion. A cousin had added, "She isn't well." The lie was simple enough to share. "Then we'll be simple too," I said, "and thorough." We opened the health tab, the one that had felt like over-preparing when he urged me to schedule appointments last month just in case. Annual physical, cognitive screen. Neurologist note. Alert, oriented, no deficits. Harold slid them into a clean sleeve labeled capacity current and added a dated summary. Paper doesn't argue, it nods. At noon a courier hand delivered what the rumor had promised. A temporary guardianship petition signed by Ryan's new in-laws as concerned observers, claiming I was unable to manage finances and prone to erratic outbursts. They cited the wedding as Exhibit A. I breathed once, then again, and felt anger. "Look for a match." I offered it a ledger. "All right," I said. "We answer on the timeline, and we answer with light." We built a kit. Harold drafted sworn statements templates for anyone who had witnessed the slap and the minutes that followed. The doorman who opened the door for me twice and watched me walk, not wobble. The server who offered me ice and heard my no, thank you arrived complete. Mr. Reynolds, who would confirm my words were sentences, not sparks. We flagged the cell phone videos already blooming online angles and timestamps that made their own arguments. We requested the venue security footage for the foyer and bar, the quiet frames where composure lives. I spend the afternoon the way you spend a storm when the roof is sound, doing useful things. I baked 2-pound cakes for the church freezer, called my primary doctor for one more letter because belt and suspenders never hurt, and walked the block where neighbors know your name before your square footage. Mrs. Carter from To Be gripped my hand and said, "I saw the clip. You were steady." I asked if she would write what she saw. "Gladly," she said, already telling me the date without looking it up. By evening, the kid had bones. Timeline from the slap to the last announcement. Capacity letters, witnesses, venue correspondence, bank confirmations with timestamps proving decisions were written, not flung. We added a short declaration from me, present tense on purpose. I live alone, manage my bills, and volunteer 2 days a week. I do not drink. I drive safely. And last month I renewed my passport. Because my life is not over. We kept adjectives in their pen. Harold called Hale law. Miss Hale listened, did not gasp, and said, "Good. We will file an opposition and a motion to dismiss." In court, calm beats theater. She booked a capacity evaluator of her own and a notary for the neighbors who don't leave the building after dusk. Also, she added, "We'll prepare a cease and desist for defamation." Not to threaten, just to make a boundary visible. That night Ryan texted a single sentence. "They said this was how to protect you." I stared at the screen until the words stopped shaking. Then I wrote back what I could carry. Protection doesn't begin with a lie. He didn't answer. Sometimes silence is a person learning. The next morning, the petition had the clerk's stamp. The date for a preliminary hearing arrived as a line on our calendar. I ironed a blouse the way my mother taught me when she wanted me brave. Collar first, then sleeves, then the front you show the world. I put the blue portfolio into a plain canvas tote. I watered my violets and left them on the sill where light finds faith without fanfare. Before bed, I copied the rule card into my notebook so I wouldn't have to reach for it in a room where microphones make everything louder. No yelling, only facts. I love my son. I do not fund his disrespect. Then I added a new line beneath it. Let there be light. They would bring a story. We would bring records. In a few days, we'd meet in the only room built for this kind of weather. And when the bailiff said, "All rise," I would stand on something I could feel. Under my feet, a floor made of sentences that could not be bent into someone else's convenience. Courts don't do chandeliers. They do fluorescent honesty. I wore a navy blouse my mother would have trusted and carried the blue portfolio in a canvas tote like a lunch I'd packed for a long day. Miss Hill met us at the elevator, black suit, flat shoes, eyes that read rooms the way nurses read faces. "Remember," she said as we passed a seal on the wall, "guardianship is extraordinary relief. They have to prove incapacity. We have records. We have witnesses. We have your steadiness." The bailiff called the case. In re. Guardianship of Celeste Walker. Brianna sat at the second table, spine rigid, fingers laced around a tissue like a prop. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. On their side, an attorney with too much cologne and a stack of adjectives he planned to spend. He started with frail, confused, erratic outburst. He said, wetting the way people say crime scene. He held up a still image of the ballroom me without glasses, hand near my cheek, and tried to hand it to the judge as proof of decline. Miss Hill didn't clear her throat or ask permission from drama. "Exhibit A for the respondent," she said, offering the judge a neatly tabbed set, capacity current on top, annual, physical, cognitive screen, neurologist letter, alert, oriented, able to manage complex affairs. Then timeline, times and actions from the moment I was slapped to the moment the manager read clause 13b. Then witnesses, the doorman's statement describing my steady walk, the server's note about my coherent refusal of ice, Mr. Reynolds' account of my 3 sentences that landed like clean nails. Then video angles, silent, time-stamped, boring in the way truth often is. Opposing counsel tried another door. She revoked payments impulsively. "Your Honor." She endangered the event. Miss Hill didn't blink. "Bank confirmations," she said, sliding the bank tab forward. "Show scheduled. Sign directives, no impulsivity, just policy." The contract she relied on expressly allows revocation for extraordinary circumstances. There is no evidence of diminished capacity, only evidence of firm boundaries. The judge, a woman with iron gray hair and a voice that could hold a room without raising itself, looked from one table to the other like she had been asked to choose between weather and calendars. "Miss Walker," she said to me, "would you like to speak?" I stood. "Only briefly, Your Honor." My rule card was in my pocket, but by now it had become muscle memory. "I live alone. I pay my bills. I volunteer at the community caf. I drove myself here. I did not shout at the wedding. I delivered 3 facts. I am 69. Not invisible." Brianna's attorney pivoted to sympathy that made a sound like scraping. "We're worried about her being exploited by strangers." Miss Hill raised an eyebrow. "The only exploitation in this record is financial dependence by adult family members. When Miss Walker stopped subsidizing, they called it confusion." The judge's mouth almost smiled and then remembered itself. She turned to Ryan. "Mr. Walker, your petition attaches statements from guests who describe an outburst. Did any of those witnesses see the initial slap?" Ryan swallowed. "I don't know." His voice was smaller than the suit he picked for today. "Do you dispute the capacity letters?" the judge asked. He shook his head. Brianna glared at him as if cooperation were betrayal. The judge leaned back, hands steepled. "Guardianship is a scalpel, not a hammer. It removes a person's rights. You don't get it because a parent tells you no, even at a poorly timed moment." She looked at me, and for a second the fluorescent light softened. "Petition denied," she said. "Any future attempt without new, credible evidence will be sanctioned." The gavel didn't bang. It simply existed. Noise tried to enter the room and got stopped at the door by the bailiff's stare. Miss Hale put a hand on my shoulder and squeezed once, the way you signal to a swimmer who has reached the wall. Opposing counsel shuffled papers loudly so sound could do what law had not. On the way out, Brianna whispered as we passed sweet as vinegar, "You think you won, but he's still my husband." "I know who he is," I said. "I'm still his mother." Both truths can stand up at the same time. Ryan stared at the floor tile, then at his hands, then at me. "Mom!" The rest drowned in the hallway. "Air." I spared him by nodding once. There would be time for sentences later. Today had been for verbs. Downstairs, Miss Hale guided us into a conference room the size of a decent porch. "Two next steps," she said. "Cease and desist letters regarding the rumor campaign, calm, firm, boring, and the estate plan we discussed." I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Let's make the boundaries visible on paper." She opened a fresh red well. "I recommend redirecting the bulk of your estate to a charitable trust with a mission. You choose elder protection, perhaps with a board that isn't related to you. We'll include a small, conditional fund that can support Ryan after counseling and debt education if he asks from a steady place. This isn't punishment. It's a guardrail. Guardianship is not a hammer. Neither is love." "Do it," I said. We discussed beneficiary designations, transfer on death instructions, a letter of wishes written in my actual voice so no one could pretend the money had ideas of its own. Harold took notes with his usual neatness. I initialed paragraphs that would one day become a different kind of shelter. When Miss Hale asked what to call the trust until I picked a permanent name, I said, "Keep it simple. The Walker Fund for Dignity." Outside, February had the good manners to be sunny. We stood on the courthouse steps with our coats open like people who had earned the right to feel air. Across the plaza, a woman I didn't know lifted her phone and then lowered it, choosing eye contact over proof. Back home, I put the blue portfolio on the kitchen table and watered my violets. They tilted toward the window like nothing dramatic had happened anywhere. The cease and desist letters went out before dinner. The hearing order landed in my inbox after. I printed it and slid it into the front of health, not because it belonged there, but because that section had started to feel like a spine. That night, I slept longer. No heroics, no speeches. A denial, stamped in black ink, is not redemption. It is a floor. On it, I could put new furniture, a will that tells the truth, a fund that remembers what hurt me, a promise to let facts do more work than fury. In the morning, I would bake rolls for the calf and answer 2 messages from women who had seen the videos and wanted to know how to make their own ledgers. Paper travels. Before I turned out the light, I copied the rule card again and added a line. Boundaries held in public are boundaries easier to keep in private. The room didn't glow. It just stayed what it was, a place that could hold the truth without flinching. The morning after court tasted like tap water, plain, clean, exactly what I needed. I set the blue portfolio on the kitchen table and wrote a new list in block letters. Put the house back on its feet. First, locks. I called Mr. Ortiz, who has been keeping doors honest on our block since before Ryan could ride a bike. He arrived with a canvas bag of brushed nickel and good advice. "Deadbolt high, strike plate long," he said, tightening the screws until the frame felt like backbone. I made coffee. He declined sugar. The door learned a new sound, sure, not loud. Second, accounts. Passwords grown old from kindness got retired. 2-factor turned on for everything that ever asked my name. Bank alerts set to ping for any withdrawal over $30. Not because I'm afraid, but because attention is a kind of love. I moved important papers, deed, titles, the latest letters from doctors into the fireproof box and labeled a second key for Miss Carter and 2B. "Only if I ask," I told her. "Only if I can't." She touched my wrist like a promise. Third, phone. I made a new folder called Noise and slid certain numbers inside. They could ring to their heart's content without pulling me away from my stove, my violets, my breath. On the fridge I taped the hearing order, not as a trophy but as a boundary made visible. On the counter I taped a smaller note, Drink water. Answer only what is asked. Some victories are dehydrated if you aren't careful. By noon I was ready for the kind of work that smells like comfort. I wiped the front porch table and set out the wooden open placard I hadn't touched since Robert died. It's not a business. It's a counter, a place for people to put their mornings down and pick them back up warmer. I tied on a clean apron and mixed batter the way women in my family pass down weather spells. Butter room temperature. Eggs one at a time. Patience the whole way. Mrs. Patel came first, watering can in hand. You look rested, she said, which is what love says when it sees a person standing in their own shape. She bought 2 slices of lemon pound cake and left one for later if later gets hard. A city worker in a safety vest stopped for coffee and paid with exact change and a story about his mother. 2 teenage girls I sometimes hear singing walked by, doubled back, and shyly asked if the porch was for anyone who says thank you. I said they did. They always do. Between customers I signed the last estate papers Miss Hale had couriered over beneficiary forms. A letter of wishes that sounded like me on a day I'd want to be remembered by. The Walker Fund for Dignity now existed beyond an idea. It had routing numbers and bylaws and a board made of people who are older than scandal. I placed the copies behind estate in the portfolio and closed the tab with a small finality. Some decisions This one held. Around 2. A message from Ryan. I saw the order. I guess that's it. The words tried to curl into pity for himself. I pressed a washcloth against my wrist to cool the anger and typed slow. The order is the floor, not the door. Get help. Pay what you owe. When you can speak without asking for my wallet, I will listen. A full minute later. Okay. Not apology. Not yet, but a comma where he'd been putting periods. In the afternoon I did little maintenance chores grief had postponed, oiled the squeaky hinge, tightened the loose knob on the hall closet, emptied a drawer of the extras people give widows because they don't know what else to do. The house felt lighter with each small task, as if it had been holding its breath to see if I'd come back to it. The violets turned their faces to a patch of sun that hadn't moved since the world began. At 4, the neighborhood kids thundered home from the bus like good news. One of them, Jamal, who mows my tiny patch of grass for pocket money, asked if I needed anything heavy carried up from the car. I pointed at 2 sacks of flour and watched him remember how strength ought to be used. You're a good one, I told him, and saw his shoulders settle into the sentence. Evening came kinder than it had in months. I took a short walk around the block to memorize which porches kept lights at dusk and which windows hosted ordinary arguments. Back home I answered 2 emails from women who had seen the wedding clips and wanted a blueprint. I told them the truth. Make a list. Collect paper. Ask for help before you're desperate. Keep your voice. I attached a sample witness form and the line I write across the top of every page. No yelling. Only facts. Before bed I stood in the hallway and listened. The new locks didn't brag. They rested. The refrigerator hummed like a steady friend. I put the index card back in my pocket's place and replaced it with something smaller. No is a complete sentence. Yes is a contract. I turned off lights without flinching at shadows, brushed my teeth, and checked the stove only once. Sleep arrived like an employee who knows the schedule. No alarms. No auditorium of what-ifs. Just the ordinary miracle of a body that believes itself safe. In the morning I would flip the open sign again, knead dough for cinnamon rolls, and answer one more message from my son if it came. The house was in order. My life was not perfect, but it was mine and everything inside it knew where to sit. The idea didn't arrive with trumpets. It came like good bread mixed one morning, risen by afternoon. I took the Walker Fund for Dignity papers from the blue portfolio, added a plain mission line in my own hand, protect elders from family financial abuse, and called 3 people who move like ballast, not wind. Miss Hale for law, Harold Carter for money, Mrs. Patel for common sense. We met at my kitchen table because that's where truth knows where to sit. Account with bylaws that refused spectacle. Miss Hale drafted intake forms that asked only what we needed to move. Who's pushing you? What do they want? What paper do you have? Harold installed a line that forwards to volunteers after hours. I wrote our first flyer on my porch between slices of lemon cake. No is a complete sentence. Yes is a contract. Bring your timeline. We will listen, rang before the ink dried. Miss Green, 74, soft voice, sharper mind than anyone had given her credit for. My grandson says I should sell the house and move somewhere safe, she whispered. He brought a man with a clipboard. I asked her what she wanted. To keep my keys, she said. That was enough. Power of attorney. He'd slipped under casserole talk and set a capacity evaluation so no one could play the confusion card. Harold moved a small grant for locks and a consult. I wrote Miss Green's timeline on lined paper at her kitchen table while her canary sang like paperwork could be music. 2 weeks later, she called back to say the clipboard men had stopped knocking and the grandson had learned how to visit without bringing agendas. I sleep now, she said. I stood in my own hallway and let that sentence make a home in my chest. Taught him the sentence that frees your throat. I will not explain what does not deserve explanation. He practiced it until it fit. Phone numbers you can trust at midnight. We told them where to hide spare keys and how to speak to managers who respect policies more than tears. Gratitude, and filled it with names I prayed over. Not because I'm holy, because thanks is a discipline. When my hands trembled, soft heart, firm schedule, proud of the step, keep stepping. One evening he left the gas card I'd once filled on my doormat with a note. This was never my right. Thank you for the times you used it anyway. I slid the card into the fireproof box under Retired Mercies and cried exactly for the length of one hymn. Grandma headline. We'll run a resource list, she promised. She kept it. The piece aired with our flyer full screen, and the hotline rang so much Harold had to buy a second handset. I baked through its cinnamon rolls, cooling in rows that looked like order. Long day. A woman reading mail with her feet up because she still can. I thought about how easily love gets counterfeited when people are scared. I wrote a line on a fresh card and taped it above my sink. We're a place to bring your hunger for food, for truth, Harold said, for a team making a different kind of celebration possible. We kept the counter low so no one had to stand to plead. We stocked pens that work. We hung the rule card in a frame by the door where anyone could borrow it. Shirt. Miss Hill gave us a stack of stamped forms and the look of a person who trusts the road under her feet. I turned the open sign to face the street. It looked like a small thing. It wasn't. Furniture. I am not furniture. I handed her a pen. Let's build your ledger, I said, and the room became exactly what we'd meant it to be, a place where the truth doesn't have to shout to be heard. The Institute smells like copy paper and cinnamon. That's how I know we built it right. Work and warmth in the same room. On the wall by the door hangs our rule card in a frame you can see from the sidewalk. No yelling, only facts. Under it, in smaller print, yes is a contract. People point, read it out loud, and some of them breathe for the first time that day. We are not a miracle shop. We are a table with pens that work. Still, miracles keep sneaking in disguised as paperwork, deeds put back in elders' hands, powers of attorney rewritten for clarity instead of convenience, locks installed before a nephew with a plan can arrive with a truck. Reporters ask for impact, so I give them the boring numbers that mean everything. In 6 months, 211 intakes, 97 cease and desists, 50 for capacity. Evaluations that close the confusion door, 31 small grants for locks and bus fare to court, 8 restraining orders, 0 guardianships granted against the people we stood beside. Then I tell them the number I write in my private ledger. One neighborhood that learned a different way to love its elders. Some mornings I leave the porch counter open, sign turned to the street when I walk to the Institute. And there's a slice of pound cake wrapped in wax paper waiting when I come back at noon. Mrs. Patel's doing. Jamal, taller every week, puts the folding of frame on the sidewalk and checks our hand sanitizer like it's part of the oath of office. Miss Hill keeps a shelf in the back with stamped forms and a sweater because she refuses to be cold on principle. Harold set up a donor page that works even when the city's internet doesn't. We are not fancy. We are faithful. Ryan comes on Tuesdays at 5. He sits in the back room after the phones go quiet and tells me what recovery sounds like. Meetings, a budget that adds up, hours picked up at the station, the counselor who won't let him drown in excuses. He does not ask for money. He returns things, an apology that isn't a performance, a set of Spare keys he says he doesn't need. A list of debts with check marks where payments used to be wishes. We talk for 40 minutes and then we lock up because boundaries keep love from spilling into a mess. I don't ask about Brianna. I don't need the weather report there. I have windows. One evening, he says, we're separated. Another, he says, I wrote a letter to Mr. Reynolds to apologize for my part that night. He slides a copy across the table. Not for proof so I can see the man he intends to become. I don't hug him every time. Sometimes loving a grown son looks like letting him leave with his shoulders squared. Policy found us. A city council member came by with a staffer and a notebook and asked what law should look like if it loved its elders more. We showed them our storm kit, the way a petition can be weaponized, how a single capacity letter can save a year in court. Write that down, the council member told the staffer, and I watched a sentence become a draft become a vote 2 months later. Now there's a hotline funded for the whole city, and every hospital social worker has our flyer. I keep the ordinance copy in a state, not because it belongs there, but because legacy should live near other plans. There is still noise. A relative posts old photos and new lies. A man in a hurry bangs on our glass and demands help on his terms. A woman walks out angry because we won't make her brother behave. We don't fix people. We fix the parts of the table that wobble when truth tries to sit down. On hard days, I bake after dinner and let the smell tell the house we are still making something. At night, when the Institute sleeps in the dark like good work should, I sit on my porch and write letters to people who haven't found us yet. I write one to a grandchild I may never meet. Dear you, if anyone teaches you that love is measured in what you can extract, find a different teacher. If anyone says family like it's a trapdoor, step back. Love with respect or do not. Call it love. When you're old enough to ask hard questions, I will tell you the truth like a ledger line by line. No matches, plenty of light. I fold the letter and slide it into a box labeled for someday. Someday has its own calendar. The porch light clicks on by time or habit, not fear. Across the street, someone's TV laughs. A bus sighs at the corner. My violets tilt their faces toward the last stubborn streak of day like they believe in schedules more than miracles. I rub the edge of my rule card until the paper grows soft and familiar, the way a prayer card does in the pocket of someone who keeps remembering. People ask if I would change anything. I think of the slap and the hush and my glasses skittering into a chandelier's imitation of daylight. I think of the 30 minutes in my car when decision came on steady feet. I think of the judge's voice, the new locks settling into the doorjamb like home, Miss Green's canary, Jamal's careful ribbon cut, Ryan's photo of a receipt with his name on it and no one else's. I would change none of the rules. I would start them sooner. On our institute wall, beneath the framed rule card, there's a second frame with 6 words. People stop to read it on their way out, sometimes touching the glass like it might grant them courage. We chose the ledger, not the match. That is the whole of it. That is the beginning and the end. The truth keeps its seat. The table holds. And in the morning, before the phones ring, I will flip the open sign toward the street and put pens where hands can find them.